We are going to start our AP check run process by running an Open Vendor Entries report. This report will show us what invoices are due as of the date filter selected, as well as any other filtering criteria. The report is located in Financial Management, Payables, under Reports. When we click on the report from the menu, a window will pop up with filtering options. In the Options Fast tab, an ending date is required to run the report. The ending date is the reference date of when the invoices are due. So when we enter today's date, the report will generate with all open vendor entries due as of today. Next, I am going to check Use External Document Number. This will show us the vendor invoice number rather than the NAV-generated invoice number. In the Vendor Fast tab, I have chosen to exclude the blocked vendors since I know we will not be paying them. In the Vendor Ledger Fast tab, I have chosen to exclude the invoices that are marked as on hold in the Vendor Ledger entries. Let's preview the report. Again, this report shows me everything that is due for payment as of today. I have reviewed the report and see that there's an invoice for Tom Clancy that has already been paid. We paid the invoice on March 15th via electronic funds transfer. Therefore, we need to record the EFT payment so the invoice will not be included in our upcoming payment journal. Let's go ahead and record the EFT payment now so we can remove it from the Open Vendor Entries report. We are going to navigate to the payment journal. There are two ways we can create the payment journal. You can either use the Suggest Vendor Payments process or manually add the vendor information in the payment journal line, which is what we're going to do. First, we will select the posting date. This should be the date the EFT was initiated, which is March 15th. Next, we select Payment as our document type. In our example, I'm going to use EFT 031515 as the document number. Select Vendor as the account type. Enter the vendor number. Tab through until you get to the balance account type and select bank. Select the bank code where the funds were drawn. The bank payment type is manual check. We select manual check and not electronic payment because electronic payment is used when you generate an ACH from NAV and upload the file to your bank. Tab over to the Applies to Doc number and click on the drop-down arrow. At this time, the Apply Vendor Entries window will pop up and you will select the invoice you want to pay. Highlight the line and click OK. You will notice on the payment journal line the amount of the check automatically filled in when we selected the payment. This manual check is ready to be posted. yes. If we rerun the Open Vendor Entries report, this invoice will no longer appear on the report since the payment has been recorded. Next, we are going to prepare our payment journal for this week's computer check run. In the payment journal, we are going to use Suggest Vendor Payments located in the ribbon. When we click on this, a pop-up window appears. In the Options Fast tab, the last payment date refers to the due date in which you want to cut checks. If we enter today's date, all invoices that are due as of today will be populated in the payment journal. Next, we are going to move down to Summarize Per Vendor. Summarizing per vendor is a recommended process. The reason is because this option will issue one check per vendor. If left blank, then one check per invoice will be issued, and you can end up with 3 checks for the same vendor because there are 3 invoices to be paid. Our posting date will be the date of the check. We will use today's date since we are cutting the checks today. The starting document number will automatically populate based on the payment journal numbering series. Once you print checks, NAV will override this number with the actual check number. The balance account type will be bank account, and we will select BOA as the bank code. Be sure to select computer check for the bank payment type so NAV will know to print a check. So we're going to change this to computer check. In the Vendor Fast tab, remove any filtering criteria on the vendor number so all invoices for all vendors that are due will populate in the payment journal. In the payment method code filter, we are going to filter on so we can exclude any payments that will require us to generate a file and upload to the bank. Click OK. You will see that we have 2 computer checks that will be printed in this check run. In the far right hand column, you will see the Applied Yes No column has a check mark. This means NAV has automatically applied the invoices to the payment. Let's run a payment journal pre-check report to confirm the payments we're about to cut. We'll go to Payment Journal Pre-check and filter on bank payment type to be computer check. And click Preview. You will notice that this report shows the amount due and the amount paid. It also shows you which invoices are going to be paid. If everything looks as expected, then you can print the checks. But before we do so, let's go ahead and edit the payment for our vendor AL Corp. We decide that we don't want to pay the full amount, so we're going to partial pay the invoices. Escape out of the report. First, we zero out the amount field on the payment journal. Then we highlight the row. We click on Apply Entries in the ribbon. In the Amount to Apply column, we change the amount from -$15,685 to -$9,000, because that is all we're going to pay for that invoice. Then we click OK. You will notice the payment journal line recalculated the amount of the check for this vendor. Let's scroll over so we can see that. Let's rerun the payment journal pre-check report. You will see the amount due for AL Corp for this particular invoice that we short paid is $15,685. However, we are only paying $9,000. Everything looks good. Now we can print checks. We click on Print Checks located in the ribbon. We will use bank account BOA for these checks. The last check number automatically populates based on the check number stored in the bank card. And then we click Print. Once the checks are done printing, the document number will be updated in the payment journal with the actual check number. If the check's printed okay, then we can post the payment journal. However, we have an issue. Our printer jammed up and the check for Dustin Simons did not print properly. Let's go ahead and void the check and reprint it. We will select the payment journal line for the vendor and click Void Check. This function removes the check number from the payment journal and opens it back up so we can print the check. We print the new check by selecting Print Checks. So let's go ahead and void this. It removes the check number. So we will print it again. Print check. Now we'll only print a check for the payment journal lines with no check mark in the check printed column. Let's go ahead and print this one. Gives the next check number. Now that we have successfully printed all of our checks, we can post the journal. Next, we're going to create our ACH payment journal. We will use Suggest Vendor Payments to pull in the vendor invoices that should be paid via electronic payment. We will use the same filtering criteria like we did with the computer checks. However, the only difference is that we're going to select electronic payment as the bank payment type and filter on payment method ACH. Once we populate the payment journal, we can run the payment journal Precheck Report to verify the payments we're about to make. For this report, we will select electronic payment. If everything looks okay, then we can begin the ACH process. Let's take a look. And everything looks fine. First, we click on the electronics payments in the ribbon and then export. So let's look at this, electronic payments, and then click export. A pop-up window appears and we enter the bank account number and the settlement date, BOA settlement date, which is today. In our scenario, we are going to change the posting date to match the settlement date, which is already populated. The number of copies refers to the number of remittance advices you would like to print. We click Preview, and that looks fine. And then we go back to this and click Export. Once the checks have been exported, we can create the transmit file that will be uploaded to the bank. The file will be stored in the location as indicated on the bank card. Now we can post. Once this is done, you click OK, and then you can post the payment journal. We will escape out of this screen. Now, occasionally checks get lost in the mail or destroyed and you need to void the check and reissue it. We can void the check by navigating to the bank card and to the check ledger entries. So let's go there. Bank accounts, check ledger entries. Okay. We can filter on the check number we wish to void. The entry status must be posted, and the check cannot be cleared on bank reconciliation, nor can it be on an open bank reconciliation waiting to be cleared. We can highlight the entry and click Void Check in the ribbon. We will enter the date that we'd like to void the check, so we're going to use today's date. We're going to choose Unapply and Void Check. This will open the vendor invoice back up for payment so we can issue the check. Then we click Yes. When we navigate to the vendor ledger entries for this vendor, we will see that the voided check and the invoice now has a remaining balance to be paid. So let's go to the vendor card. There is the voided check. Remember the vendor we made a partial payment to, AL Corp? Let's take a look at their vendor ledger entries. We see a remaining balance to be paid for the invoice we short paid. This concludes the section for AP Payments.